One book, one extraordinary life. 48 chapters of saints, science, and the search for God.
I'm Kai.
And I'm Maya.
And this is our take on Autobiography of a Yogi, chapter by chapter.
A woman stands in an open-topped automobile, her hand raised in blessing over hundreds of disciples. She is tiny, impossibly tiny. And something about her, her consciousness has already left the body and gone somewhere far away, while her hand continues moving in blessing. She's here and utterly absent at the same time.
Chapter 45, The Bengali Joy-Permeated Mother. And this isn't a teacher or a guru in the formal sense. This is a woman saint, Ananda Moyi Ma, someone whose entire consciousness is so anchored in the divine that her body is almost peripheral, like a puppet the infinite is moving around.
The setup is beautiful, actually. Yogananda's niece, Amio Bose, comes to him in Calcutta and says, "Before you leave India, you must see someone." There's an intensity to her voice. She describes a moment when Ananda Moyi Ma visited a dying man, just stood by his bed, touched his forehead, and the death rattle stopped. The disease vanished. The man woke up well.
Seriously? So this is happening in real time, not a legend. A woman who's alive walking around India, and wherever she goes, people are healed just by her presence, her touch. And Yogananda immediately understands that this is essential. He has to see her before he leaves.
So Yogananda and Mr. Wright set out right away from his father's home in Calcutta. They get in the Ford and they're driving through the city, navigating the streets of Bhawanipur. And suddenly there's this street scene, an unusual gathering, and standing in an automobile, these hands raised in blessing over about 100 disciples.
Ananda Moyi Ma, right there. It's almost like she was waiting, because what are the odds that they'd arrive exactly at the moment she's blessing her disciples before departure? But that's how it works with saints. Consciousness draws consciousness. They magnetize toward each other.
And what happens next is so striking. She sees Yogananda, just sees him across the crowd, and she immediately steps down from the automobile and walks toward him. She doesn't know him from any previous meeting, but something in her recognizes him completely, like soul to soul.
And she says, "Father, you have come." Not welcome, you have come. Like she's been waiting, like their souls already know each other across lifetimes. And she puts her arm around his neck and rests her head on his shoulder, right there in front of all those disciples.
Mr. Wright is watching this thinking, wait, he just told me he didn't know this woman, but here she is greeting him like a beloved teacher arriving home. The disciples are all staring in astonishment. Something sacred is happening. The book says Yogananda instantly saw that she was in a high state of samadhi, utterly oblivious to her outward form as a woman. She knew herself as the changeless soul.
That's the teaching right there. Consciousness recognizing consciousness. Two souls meeting as themselves, not as personalities, not as man and woman, but as luminous consciousnesses beholding each other. And that recognition is ecstatic. That's why she's called the blissful mother.
She pulls him into the automobile, and as they sit together, she enters an even deeper state. Her beautiful eyes glance heavenward. They become stilled, gazing into something internal that's closer to her than breath. The disciples are chanting softly, "Victory to Mother Divine."
And Yogananda is sitting there with her in this state, taking her in, her physical form, her spiritual presence. The contrast between her tiny body and the infinite consciousness expressing itself through it. Long black tresses, a red dot of sandalwood on her forehead marking the spiritual eye. Tiny hands, tiny feet, but spiritually boundless.
Yogananda reflects on this moment later. He writes, "I have found many men of God realization in India, but never before have I met such an exalted woman saint." He's met Sri Yukteswar. He's met Lahiri Mahasaya through the stories, but he says this woman is different. Her face is burnished with ineffable joy, the kind of joy that comes from being permanently dissolved in the infinite.
While she's in that deep state, one of her disciples comes over and Yogananda asks questions. And what she describes is extraordinary. The blissful mother travels all over India. Hundreds of disciples follow her everywhere. She's brought about social reforms. Even though she's Brahmin, she recognizes no caste distinctions. She's a bridge through the entire society.
But here's what's really stunning. The Chela says we have to mother her. She takes no notice of her body at all. If no one fed her, she wouldn't eat. She wouldn't even ask about food. She'd just disappear into the divine. So the disciples feed her like an infant. They're caring for an infinitely realized being because consciousness has withdrawn so completely that the body would fade without their care.
For days together, she stays in divine trance, barely breathing, eyes unwinking, just anchored in the infinite. And that raises a question, Why does she eat at all? Why not just stay in that state permanently? And the answer is, there's a teaching happening. She's demonstrating something. The body is still needed to show others what's possible.
And then Yogananda notices her husband in the crowd, one of her chief disciples, a broad-shouldered man with long hair and a hoary beard. His hands are folded in reverential attitude, and the story behind this marriage is one of the most remarkable transformations in the book.
Because listen to this. Years ago, right after they married, on their wedding night, he came to her with desire, and when he touched her body, he received a violent shock, like lightning, and in that instant he understood. Within that body dwells not his wife, but the divine mother.
And he wept. He knelt and he said, "Mother, because I have desecrated your bodily temple with the thought of lust, I take this solemn vow. I shall be your disciple. I shall take a vow of silence. I will serve you in devotion, never speaking again as long as I live."
And he kept that vow. He's been silent for all these years. And that's not suppression, that's surrender. That's what happens when consciousness meets consciousness at that level. The personality dissolves, the ego vanishes. All that remains is pure devotion, absolute service.
She comes back into her body. She emerges from that deep trance and starts focusing on the material world. And immediately she's asking Yogananda about his life. Where does he stay? When he tells her he's returning to America, he just asks her, "An Indian woman saint would be appreciated there by spiritual seekers. Would you like to go?"
And she says simply, "If Father can take me, I will go." Wait, that's so interesting. No resistance, no attachment to India, no sense of, oh, I belong here. Just, if the guru wants it, I'll do it. But immediately, her disciples start in alarm. 20 or more are always with her. Wherever she goes, they must go.
So Yogananda laughs and has to abandon the plan. There's something beautiful about his willingness to include all of them, but practically it's not possible. The group would just keep growing. More disciples, more people, more attachment. But here's what matters. He sees her absolute openness. No attachments, no resistance, complete transparency to guidance.
So he invites her to visit the Ranchi school instead, the children's school where he's been teaching, and she agrees immediately, whenever Father wishes. And when the day comes, the entire school is in celebration.
The children are lined up at the gates, thousands of marigold flowers being showered on the path, conch shells blowing, drums beating. The sound is alive with devotion, chanting, "Victory Ananda Moyi Ma Ki Jai," victory to the Mother of Joy. This is a saint being received like the divine she is.
And she walks through this scene with absolute simplicity. Just a tiny woman in simple clothing, her consciousness carrying what the text calls a portable paradise within her. The joy radiates from her, and the children are magnetized instantly. All those young people drawn in by her presence.
She seats herself by his side with a childlike smile. And there's this beautiful paradox the text mentions. She's the closest of dear friends, making you feel completely beloved. Yet an aura of remoteness surrounds her, the paradoxical isolation of omnipresence. Because she's with you, but her consciousness is simultaneously everywhere. She's present, but never lost in the relationship.
He asks her, "Please tell me something about your life, your history." And her answer is going to reshape everything. She spreads her hands in this gentle gesture. "Father, there is little to tell. My consciousness has never associated itself with this temporary body. Before I came on earth, I was the same."
Think about that. She's not saying she achieved realization. She's saying consciousness never left its source. It was always established. As a little girl, I was the same. I grew into womanhood, but still I was the same. The body changed, the circumstances changed, but consciousness didn't move. It remained in its eternal state.
And then she goes deeper. "When my family arranged my marriage, I was the same. When my husband came to me with passion and touched my body, I was the same." Her consciousness never identified with being a woman, never became the wife, never participated in the narrative of marriage and desire.
That's consciousness speaking, not personality, not ego. Pure consciousness, unchanging, untouched by time, untouched by the body, untouched by the drama of incarnation. She came here already fully realized. The body grew, but consciousness never identified with it.
So the teaching about realization shifts completely. It's not something you become through effort and practice. It's something you recognize was always true. The consciousness is never actually bound. Ananda Moyi Ma never made the identification with the body. She was born already free.
And then she says something that's going to echo forever. She leans toward Yogananda with absolute certainty. In front of you now, I am the same. And ever afterward, though the dance of creation changes around me in the hall of eternity, I shall be the same.
Let that sink in. The dance of creation is changing. The universe is being born and dying. Consciousness is streaming into form and streaming out. But consciousness remains unchanged. The witness, the background, the eternal.
So she's teaching him about the ultimate nature of reality, that consciousness is fundamental. It doesn't become, it doesn't change. It's not affected by birth or marriage or being beloved by thousands. The dance changes, but the witness, consciousness, remains eternally the same. That's samadhi. That's realization.
Not something you achieve, something you are. Not something you become, something you always have been. And the whole teaching of Kriya Yoga and practice and effort, it's all to remove the obstacles to recognizing this truth that was never not true.
And she sinks into another deep meditative state right there. Her form becomes absolutely still, statue still. The book says she fled to her ever-calling kingdom. Her eyes become dark pools. Consciousness has withdrawn from the physical entirely. And Yogananda sits with her for an hour, just being present to the ecstatic trance, not trying to teach, just honoring the sacred state.
He's learning something that goes beyond words, through presence, through the transmission that happens when one consciousness is with another consciousness established in the infinite. This is the guru-disciple transmission. It happens beyond words.
When she returns, she comes back with a little gay laugh, just laughter, the sense that she's been somewhere infinitely more real, and returning to the body she finds it almost amusing. The contrast, the heaviness of matter, the slowness of time here.
Yogananda asks if she'll walk to the garden for photographs, and she says, "Of course, Father, your will is my will," because there's no separate will. What the guru wants is what she wants. She's completely transparent, just available to whatever is needed.
They take photographs, and throughout, her eyes retain what the text calls the unchanging divine luster, just steady, peaceful, utterly established in something that nothing can touch. Not the camera, not the crowd. Consciousness is consciousness. It can't be disturbed.
Then it's time for the feast. Ananda Moyi Ma sits on a blanket seat and a disciple feeds her. She swallows obediently, like an infant. She doesn't notice the difference between curries and sweetmeats. She eats because the disciples insist on keeping the body alive, but consciousness is elsewhere.
That's what happens at the highest stages of realization. The body keeps functioning, the mouth eats, the hands gesture in blessing, but consciousness has gone to the source. There's functioning without attachment, action without a doer. That's nishkama karma, pure service.
Okay, I'm struck by something though. We're reading about this woman who's achieved the highest states, and yet she's completely engaged with life. She's not withdrawn, she's not zombified. She eats, she laughs, she blesses children, she's present, but from a consciousness that's fundamentally free.
That's the paradox, you know? That's what makes her extraordinary. She's not withdrawn from the world. She's completely available to it. She's just not identified with it. She's not claiming it. She's transparent to the infinite that moves through her.
As dusk approaches, she leaves with her party. Rose petals are showered on her as the automobile moves away. Her hands are raised in blessing over the children. Their faces shine with the affection she has effortlessly awakened. She doesn't have to do anything. Just her presence does it. One consciousness saluting itself through different forms.
There's a teaching passage that follows. Yogananda quotes Jesus, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind, and with all thy strength. This is the first commandment." And he says Ananda Moyi Ma has solved this completely.
She's cast aside every inferior attachment. She offers her sole allegiance to the Lord, not through intellectual philosophy, through the pure logic of faith, through childlike surrender to the infinite. And that's what the nations have forgotten, Yogananda says, the stark simplicity of loving God.
Everything else is distraction. Humanitarian gestures are good, Yogananda acknowledges. They turn your attention away from yourself, but they don't free you from your single responsibility, to love God, to establish unity with the infinite. That's the teaching.
He's saying, look at this woman. She solved the only problem in human life, establishment of unity with God. Not in theory, in lived reality. She just is it, and anyone entering her presence feels it immediately.
The last encounter is at the train station, months later. Ananda Moyi Ma stands among her disciples on the platform, waiting for the train. She tells Yogananda she's going to the Himalayas. Disciples have built her a hermitage in Dehradun, a sacred place designed for her presence.
And as she's about to board, Yogananda notices something profound. He marvels at it. Whether amidst a crowd, on a train, feasting, sitting in silence, her eyes never look away from God. Her gaze is permanently locked on the divine, walking through the world, but her inner eye always on the infinite.
And as she leaves, Yogananda hears her voice echoing, her voice which he describes as an echo of measureless sweetness. And she says the words that define her entire being.
Behold, now and always, one with the eternal, I am ever the same. That's her signature. That's her teaching. That's her lived truth. Before, during, and after everything, she remains. Consciousness remains.
The teaching is about what it means to be established in samadhi while moving through the world, to be present to blessing and feeding children and boarding trains. But consciousness never leaves God, never forgets, never gets distracted. That's possible. That's human potential.
And after meeting Ananda Moyi Ma, Yogananda has encountered the most extraordinary woman saint he's ever met. Not a guru like Sri Yukteswar, not a householder saint performing miracles, but a woman whose consciousness has so completely merged with the infinite that her body is just an instrument of grace, automatic, absolutely free.
The whole arc of Act 3 is becoming clear. Yogananda is back in India, meeting the living demonstration of everything he teaches, not on paper, in the flesh. Gandhi with his political wisdom, Ananda Moyi Ma with her ecstatic communion. Real human beings established in the infinite.
And next time, something even stranger. Another woman saint who's gone further in a different direction. A woman named Giri Bala who hasn't eaten in decades, sustained entirely by the prana, the cosmic energy of God itself.
Can consciousness actually sustain a human body without food? Not for a day, for decades. That's coming next. The woman yogi who never eats. And it's going to stretch everything you think you know about what's possible.
See you next time.
See you next time.